Good afternoon, Natalie. How are you today?
I'm good, Cheryl. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you for joining me again for part two. Our partner in planning and designing, Jess, is not with us today, but she's a great contributor to our work, so we want to honor her contributions as well. Welcome to part two, planning for inclusive classroom environments in all subject areas. We will definitely focus on science, but the ideas behind our work in this session are really pervasive in all subjects, and it's really about how do we facilitate the best environment for a multi-age or combined classroom setting? This is a land acknowledgement that we have used before, and you'll recognize this amazing drone video footage that we have been gifted to. Gift That didn't sound quite right, but this beautiful footage provides us with landscapes from all across Alberta, which we've used before and you'll see us refer to in our work. We love to use this during a land acknowledgement because it allows us to really place ourselves in in the land and giving us a chance to recognize that diversity in terms of the ecosystems and the landforms, and to recognize really how tremendously beautiful and privileged we are. I'm glad to be a settler on this land, and I'm very grateful to the Indigenous people, particularly who've been here before us on the traditional Blackfoot territory where Adelie and I are recording from today, which is home to the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai nations. Of course, the Ithaca Stoney Nakoda Nation, which includes the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Good Stoney First Nations. We are also very close to the home of the Tsuut'ina Nation and the Otipemisiwak Métis government of Métis Nation, Alberta District 6.
This is us. This is our team. And as Cheryl mentioned from the offset, Jess is with us in spirit today. And we really appreciate the work and time that she put into creating these resources with us.
Nice new haircut too, Adelie. We got a comment on that. Let's
Yeah.
talk about
You'll notice
creating
a change from number one. But today we
creating a
want to,
multi-age classroom culture. What does that look like? Oh, this is a favorite of mine. Would you like to talk about the learning pit?
yeah, we've lots of favorites, and those of you who come on our journeys with us, we always banter back and forth. But I think, when we were thinking about how to put together a conversation around culture, one of the things that all of us as educators want to do is think about how are we creating a culture for learning? How are we creating a culture for students to lose their efficacy, struggle in that productive struggle piece, and build back up their efficacy? And in a multi-age classroom, it's exciting because we have the opportunity to personalize and respond to the diversity. We also can, in multi-age classrooms, depending on the number of grades that we have together, because in our province we've got 2 classes together, we've got 4, we've got 5, we've got 8 grades together. We have a whole continuum, and we really want to support you on that journey and thinking about how to create that safe place. And so we wanted to help start off with, how do we normalize that struggle? How do we help students create those failure loops and remember that not knowing something and not getting the answer right is common. And in fact, we're looking for where's our next mistake, because as soon as we've made a mistake, we're going to work to mitigate it and move forward. And this example is always helpful for us to remember that when folks are in the bottom of the pit is when we don't give up and we don't let them give up, because that's where that rigor comes from. And there's always going to be a balance of how much do we support and how much do we move forward with our kiddos. Cheryl, do you want to talk about how growth mindset maybe fits in with that, with the pit?
I think that this, the notion of Carol Dweck's growth mindset is not a new idea to many of us, but in a multi-age or combined classroom, it's even more important. And I think that because of the the fact that students are going to see in even a more visible way that kids are at different places than they are. And so by normalizing that growth and just seeing it as a continuum, that we're always moving and shaking and growing and stretching, that this language that it can sort of it can be used to in conversations with students rather than having kids rushing through work to say, I'm done, I'm done, I'm done. Or, to give them questions to say, what might be the next step? And to help to build some agency within their own um, sense of who they are as learners, and to know that you might have to circle back on something, but that you can actually stretch further than what you may have thought. So these these phrases and tiny shifts in the ways in which we frame learning and we talk about mistakes and we talk about what's going on in our brains can really be powerful.
I absolutely love that. I think one of the things that when we talk about a community and building relationships is how do we create a community where students have the agency that you've just talked about, Cheryl, but also feel that sense of independence. I don't need the teacher for the next step. I have some tools or ways or processes in my classroom. I'm wondering if you want to speak to that a little bit because it's really what we're talking about here in terms of how do we prioritize that relationship.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's I've really done a lot of work in the past around building the notion and the concept of a learning community, and how do we work together as professionals? How can we use each other to differentiate and improve the conditions for students? And that actually goes beyond just teacher to teacher, or, for some of you in colony schools, when you're on your own, how do you use community members? How can you incorporate learning from parents and learning from other students? And so the notion that we are not in a classroom with our grade fours must sit over here and work together, and I'm only talking to grade four right now, and then moving over here to talk to grade five. Sometimes there might be a place where you have to have those specific conversations, but overall, it's really about building a classroom learning community that includes everyone, regardless of the grade or level of achievement that they might be working on at that current moment.
Yeah, it's such a good way. I mean, we know in our classrooms we have that continuum. And so do I know how to have those learning conversations with anybody who's sitting around me and what might that look like? This is another way of looking at it, Cheryl. And I wonder if you'd walk us through what Garfield is thinking here.
Oh, Garfield Ginny Newman, who works out of the University of Toronto and is foundational to the Critical Thinking Consortium, he and his wife, Laura Ginny Newman, wrote an article, which we've cited here on the slide for you, that talks about use the double helix DNA structure model as representative of assessment and instruction being integral parts of learning, that you can't have one without the other, and that fluidity that is the bonds that are created between them are all of the things that we do to build trust and have relationships with students. We know that without that relationship, there's not any learning that's going to happen. And so I thought it was just a brilliant example, and I would like to credit the Ginny Newmans for this visual that really shows us how important the relationships are that we have with our students, and particularly in a multi-age or a combined class. Now, this another resource, somebody who speaks our language in terms of that value of relationships, is Dr. Jody Carrington, and I loved this quote. It's the relationship with the one you are trying to teach, lead, or love is where all the power lies. And isn't this just the truth? So anything you can do to foster, how do you get to know students? How do you get a chance to ask them about, how was dance last night? Or how did your baseball practice go? Like anything that can connect to them on a personal level will contribute to what can happen in that classroom culture. This is a list of tried and true ways that can make space for relationships in your classroom. And when you go into our resource guide, and you'll see all of the links to the slides, and we have all of these here for you. They are quick, short, either videos or articles that will give you some ideas for how to build culture in any classroom, but also most particularly in a combined grade class.
Which leads into why are we building those relationships? Why are we wanting to foster those pieces? And that's because we want to provide access to learning. We know that we have a range of kiddos in our classroom. We always have. That's not new. And however, we can attend to it differently when we provide and give that credo to the multi-age classroom. Cheryl found this beautiful picture, and I just want to I just would love for folks to hear your explanation of how might we use an image like this to ignite learning for a wide range of students? How could we use this with all of our kiddos?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, getting outside and using a real world experiences, getting hands-on opportunities for students, and sometimes an artifact like an image can also serve as that entry point. It's like an open opportunity to have a conversation with a wide range of people learning at different places. So imagine having this conversation with adults, like, what would we even, wow, look at the detail in that. We can talk about the crystals, we can talk about the all of the science that created the conditions for this moment in time to exist. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting, I was doing some digging because I've seen pictures be a really effective prompt and use for multi-age classes in mathematics settings. And then I found this one too. So if we could just go to the next slide, it gives us an opportunity to go in and think, okay, what kinds of questions or topics could we span across, a question that could be at an easy access point for everyone. So we think about the margins of our group. What do we see here in this image? What do we notice? Let's just start generating some observations. What questions do you have? What do you think you know about what's true? And then you can start to document and track some of the questions. You're going to have some students who are coming to the conversation with more background knowledge than others, but it generates that open creation of a space where it's safe to talk about things. Then you can start adding in different resources and questions that can make examples of this. Well, how do you think we might make a crystal? And you're pulling from different content areas, sorry, maybe within science, but different grade levels of outcomes, to try to show that link by using one experience or one artifact to generate that conversation. And then students can start to work at areas that are more specific to their needs.
I love it. And when I first looked at it, I was thinking about the spectrum of the light conversation, opaque, not opaque as we, and then in Div 1, and as we move into Div 2, where do we go with light? All the way to physics, in high school, where we're looking at light refractions, and we're looking at why are some lighter than others, and why do we see red in some of those and pink and not in others? And so we could have an amazing conversation that, to your point, that would span all of those different learning outcomes.
Yeah, yeah,
And
I
I think it fits in here with that hands-on piece, right? Going to nature, seeing crystals, seeing light in nature, and then how do we bring that back into some different life experiences in terms of how they create those crystals and those light moments, and can they duplicate it
mhm, mhm.
in class, and what does that tell us, and what do we learn from those kinds of pieces?
I like the way that this particular resource, Pictures for Talk, it's a UK-based resource, but it's free. And so check it out in our resource links here. But you can see that across different scientific literacy and topical areas, there's a variety of different pictures and images, really high quality, beautiful, provocative opportunities to dig into the real science, and then to ask those questions, and then to provide other resources or other lab situations, or how can we find out more? How can we collect data about this particular aspect? And so we just wanted to share this resource with you.
And I just, Cheryl, as you were talking, I was thinking back to like, well, how does this, somebody might be listening to what we're talking about, and we've thought it through, but I wonder if somebody's not saying, well, why, how does a picture help for the culture? And when we talked about that span and building the relationships, and the idea that grade twos are talking to grade eights and using the same provocation, that same picture to move forward their learning, I think is where that power comes from Jody's quote. And so we just want to encourage you, in as you're building that culture in your classroom for growth, to also think about, how can I bring folks together? And so the next little piece that we're going to just use to end is, we wanted to bring together all of what we've been chatting about today. And there's this lovely website that you'll see the link in our resource guide that Cheryl's talked to you about. And what we're looking here is, again, a different kind of provocation that supports the students in your class to build their own data and their own information through activities that you get them talking and thinking about. And so in this case, we might show this picture. And I'm gonna ask Cheryl to indulge me for a moment, and I'm gonna pretend that she's my classroom. And the question we're gonna ask is, Cheryl, tell me, when you look at these 4 pictures of a park bench, which one doesn't belong?
Well, the first thing that I notice is the material that they're made from. I noticed that 3 of them they seem to be made of like, well, it's hard to tell because I can't touch, but maybe a metal or a plastic material. And the one in the top right is predominantly made out of wood. So that was the first one. But then I also noticed something about color and shapes. So those are the kinds of things you're thinking?
Exactly. And we could make an argument for each of the pictures being the one that doesn't belong. And what's fun about that in a classroom, to Cheryl's example of the extension and being able to hit both edges of your classroom, some students may just see that one was made of wood and had vertical slats on it, and that's all they're going to be able to talk about as the data. Well, then some might be able to go further and say, well, the bottom corner is a square, and you can seat a lot of people there. And the other pictures, you can only probably maybe put 3 people on them. And so as kids sort of move forward, as they start to build their own pieces, you're going to be able to very quickly, as a teacher, see what they know and what they don't know about how to make meaning of this. How might we make meaning of these leaves? When we look at where they're supporting outcomes, as you're having this conversation, depending on where it goes and how your students are showing evidence, we are supporting outcomes in science, social studies, French language, physical education, wellness, math, and ELAL, all the way from one picture piece. And so, yes, Cheryl and I are focused on science today, but it was interesting when we started to pull out learning outcomes, we could find learning outcomes that we explore nature, we explore mental health and wellness for being out in nature. We look at the different kinds of leaves and trees. So we get into conifer, we look in social studies, which of these would have been traded. We've got maple syrup. Like, there's all kinds of pieces that can come from these pictures. And the last one we're going to show you that we want you to think about with us today is, which one here doesn't belong? If you show this in your classroom, what do you think your students might say? What do you wonder about what they could show you in their learning, and what part of the learning outcomes might they pull from to be able to show you that?
I actually can envision this on a bulletin board that's left up around, and kids could use or maybe it's a whiteboard, and they could write their responses. They could write what they noticed. They could have thought bubbles, sticky notes, and pins, or whatever it is. But it'd be really great to gather a wide range of responses, and a way of bringing everybody together to solve a common problem, but also allowing you an entry point to dip into the specific learning outcomes that are so important that we need to address in each grade. Yeah. Thanks for bringing these awesome examples, Adelie. Mhm.
Thank you. And thanks for today. Cheryl, thanks for working through culture with us, thinking about different learning activities, and then providing some examples of what it looks like in a classroom together. As always, it's so much fun to be on these journeys with you.
Two, we'll see you in session 3 very soon. Check out the resource guide, friends. We'll see you soon.
Bye.